Right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Sisters Corner podcast. And we have been MIA for yet again for another few months, but we are back and we are alive, alhamdulillah. And it's good to be back, alhamdulillah. But we're going to be speaking about something slightly different today, which we believe is very, very important that we address. So we're not going to be speaking about things you'd normally find on our channel, but inshallah, this is going to be as beneficial. So stay until the end because this is going to be very, very transformational, inshallah. And I know a lot of sisters have a lot of questions and are confused with what's going on and what they should be doing. And that's what we are here to address today, inshallah. I have with me Sister Sara, who I don't even think I need to introduce her because if you don't know her, or what rock have you been sleeping under? She's been with us throughout our journey doing podcasts. But either way, Sister Sara, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to have you here with me today, inshallah. How are you doing? And inshallah, you can tell the sisters a little bit more about yourself before we get started.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yes, I'm Sister Sara, in case for whoever out there doesn't know me yet. Alhamdulillah, I've done a few podcasts with Sister Waad and others so far, and inshallah there will be definitely more in the future. A little bit about myself, I guess. I'm a volunteer student and teacher at the I3 Institute, alhamdulillah, which is based in Canada. So if you guys don't know who they are, please check them out. There's an official website, i3institute.ca.
Link will be in the description box for those who are interested in signing up, inshallah.
Inshallah. Yes, there's lots of learning opportunities there. So please check it out. In English for sure, and I believe in Arabic as well. So alhamdulillah, inshallah, this podcast will be very educational. Definitely it's different from previous topics, but it is still very important. And I know, Sister Waad, you were going to take us through some of those questions that the sisters had for this topic.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, a lot has been going on. And there is a lot of propaganda, a lot of confusion. And as women, I think we're being really affected by seeing, and I think just as human beings, not even like a feminine thing at this point, but seeing all those children being hurt. I think one of the first questions that I've heard a lot of sisters ask is, where is Allah's help? Like, why is Allah letting this happen? Is He punishing us? Or is He punishing the Palestinians? Why are we not seeing any help? This is something that I've seen not only sisters personally asking me this, but across the board on multiple comments of sisters asking this. So what would you say? What is the response to that?
Yeah. It is a fair question, but of course, we always need to trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that everything that happens to us within the dunya is definitely a part of our qadar and qada, right? So there's an aspect of destiny here, predestination, as we all know, but there's also free will involved. And so obviously, just because we see bad, terrible, evil things going on in the world does not mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing it. It just means that Allah has given every human being free will to make decisions. And unfortunately, there's lots of people out there who make the wrong ones. That's one way of looking at it. But another thing that we need to keep in mind is that as an ummah, we need to ask ourselves if we are really doing our job as Muslimin. Because subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already promised us victory, right? Especially in the case of Palestine. But what exactly do we need to do to gain that victory, right? And definitely there are many hadith and ayat that tell us exactly what we should be doing. And one of which is this ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Actually, it's two ayats, 78 to 79, and I'll just read it in English, inshallah. So it says, "Cursed by the tongue of David and Jesus, the son of Mary, were those who disbelieved among the children of Israel. That was because they disobeyed and transgressed. They would not prevent one another from the wrongdoing they did. How evil was that which they were doing." Right? So, subhanAllah, in this ayah, two of the best prophets and messengers, Dawood alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam, are actually cursing their own people. And the reason why is because they disobeyed, right? They were not following the rules like how they were supposed to, and they transgressed. They were oppressive. And because they did not prevent one another from doing wrong, they did not enjoin good and forbid evil, right? And so that's why they actually cursed them for that. And subhanAllah, if the Muslimin, who are supposed to be the best of the best, who are supposed to be the ones who enjoin good, who forbid evil, who stand up for justice, and if we are not doing that, then what happens? Injustice will happen. So if we're not going to hold each other accountable, if we're not going to speak the truth, then of course this is the natural result of that. And definitely, when we enjoin good and we forbid evil, what are we really saying here? We're saying that we live by Islam and we call for Islam. But if we do not call for Islam, we do not live by Islam, we do not hold each other accountable, then of course we're going to see all the injustice that is going on in the ummah. It's no wonder that that is happening, right? So you can look at it as a punishment if you want, but really, I think the better way to put it is that we reap what we sow, right? If we're not going to do the instructions that Allah has given us, which is worship Him, right, without any partners or associates, and to enjoin good and forbid evil, which basically means to live by Islam, then of course this is what's going to happen. And subhanAllah, there's even which is authentic, and it's found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi. And basically it says that the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "By the one in whose hand is my soul, you must enjoin good and you must forbid evil, or else Allah will soon send punishment upon you. Then you will call upon Allah and it will not be answered for you." So subhanAllah,
Wow.
this hadith is so powerful because the Prophet himself is saying that, look, if you as a Muslim do not enjoin good and forbid evil, you yourself do not do this, then of course the natural result is going to be injustice in the land, right? If we don't call for justice, we don't live by it, then there's going to be injustice. And then once that injustice happens, what's the natural result? You're going to make dua, Ya Allah, help us. Why aren't you helping us? Right? And Allah will not answer you. Your dua to be answered, you need to start doing what Allah has told you to do in the first place, which is to speak the truth, to call for Islam, to live by Islam, to call out the injustice. So, subhanAllah, this is very much tied to another question that I know sisters have also been asking, which is about like the protests, right, Sister Waad? And subhanAllah, like people who say that it's haram to protest, you're saying it's haram to speak out, when this is actually, if you look at the Quran and Sunnah, you'll find the exact opposite. Actually, you must speak out. You must protest. You must post online. You must, do anything that you can, really, whether it's boycotting or protesting in the streets or posting online, doing podcasts, talking about it with other Muslims and non-Muslims, right? Whatever it is that you can do, you should be doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, subhanallah. I definitely agree. And I think one of the reasons why, as a collective, is that many people don't want to take the responsibility. We don't want to sit down and say, you know what, we messed up. Let us work towards change. A lot of people will find it much easier to just say, oh no, you know what, it's Allah's doing this. And I think there's even a verse in the Quran where Allah mentions, but it's kind of like a slightly different topic, where Allah mentions a certain group of people who will say, well, if Allah willed for these people to eat, like, Allah's telling these people, go and feed these people. And they're like, oh no, if Allah willed for them to be fed, they would be fed, right? And it's like, you don't want to take the initiative. They don't want to work towards the change because, they just want to put all of that on, on the destiny, right? but we don't understand that Allah has given us within that free will to make a change. And in that we have a responsibility, especially as an ummah. We cannot expect to be successful without working towards that success. And I think there's a sense of entitlement, and I've seen this, maybe it's arrogance. I can't quite pinpoint it, but I've seen a lot of people say that just because we are Muslims, it's as if we deserve, just because we are Muslims, we deserve, victory and prosperity and all of that. And we don't understand that one of the lessons that if we go back to the seerah, that when the Sahaba lost in one of the battles, they expected that because just by going in that we're Muslims, that we're supposed to win. That's it. But and somewhere in the midst of the battle, they started to turn away. They started to not listen to the Prophet, and as a result of that, they ended up losing, right? And so we have to understand that our actions very much will affect what happens to us, right? We must not just expect that without doing anything that we deserve everything. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to test us, that the very reason He gave us the free will is to test us, to see are we deserving of it. So if we now are looking at the state of the ummah, we need to sit down and say, you know what, we messed up, how can we fix it? And we need to start working towards that. We need to start taking responsibility. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even tells us that He does not change the state of a people until they change it themselves. Allah is telling us directly here that you need to change. You need to make some sort of effort in your behalf for change to happen, right? And here, the hadith that we have in front of us that you mentioned earlier, this is the Prophet telling us once again that you have to make change. You have to enjoin. You cannot expect justice to prevail if you're not fighting for it, right? Because shaitan exists. Either you overcome with your actions, or shaitan overcomes with his actions, right? And his people, right? Yeah. SubhanAllah. Yes. I once heard of a politician, I can't remember his name, I think it was Erbakan, who once mentioned, he said, Muslims who don't care about politics will be ruled by politicians who don't care about Islam. And that's the reality that we're in right now. We have slacked, we have sat back, right? And we're waiting for the West to tell us what to do and what is right and what is wrong and this, that, and this, that. And then we sit down and we worry and we, we're crying and we're confused and we're asking, why Allah, when things like this happen to us, subhanAllah, and we don't realize we need to take responsibility. We need to take the initiative. And yes. I think for a long time, we have been colonized to believe that we don't have the power, right? And once again, there are people who are coming out and trying to silence us by saying boycotting is haram, protesting is haram. We don't understand. This is actually the enemies of Islam. This is what they want us to believe, because they want us to sit down and once again let them do all the work. And the work that they do is not going to benefit us, So we need to stand up and we need to push back in whatever capacity that we can.
Yeah, and subhanAllah, there's so many other ayat and hadith that talk about this specific point. But we're just bringing just a few examples to you guys that are authentic, and these are very strong words from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And even if we think about the ayah, right, from Surah Al-Ma'idah that was just mentioned, Dawood alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam, they were cursing their own people who were the Muslims at the time. SubhanAllah, like if you look at the Quran, definitely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Christians quite extensively. But if you compare it to the Jews are actually brought up more, right? Allah talks about them more. And it's almost as if there's so many lessons to take from the things that they did, right? It's like Allah is telling us, like, don't be like all these things that they did, right? And this is one of them. One of them is that, look, they disobeyed, right? They were not submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? They changed their books and they played around with the rulings, right? They transgressed. They were oppressive themselves, right? And they also did not do what they're supposed to do, which is to enjoin good and forbid evil, right? Which is to call out injustice. They did not do these things. And subhanAllah, like imagine Dawood alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam cursing you for that. The best people cursing you, subhanAllah. So we need to keep in mind that we cannot be like them, right? And that's why there's so many examples and in the Quran, and definitely in the Hadith and the Sirah as well, but especially in the Quran, right? That we have to learn from their mistakes. And this even brings us to maybe another point, Waad, where people say not only it's haram to boycott, right? Which, by the way, they're actually that ruling is totally invalid because even under a khilafa, a legitimate Islamic government, the government does not have the ability to tell people where to spend their money here, right? So, subhanallah, when these individuals, I don't even want to call them scholars, to be honest with you, try to say that it's haram to boycott because the government didn't tell you, on what basis can you say that? Because even a legitimate ruler does not have the ability to do that. So definitely, one of the narratives that people are trying to put out there is that it's haram to boycott, it's haram to protest, right?
Yeah.
When we know that neither of these things are true. But then there's the other side of things, right? Where people try to tell Muslims, okay, like what should we be doing pretty much? And they only focus on dua, really. And they say that in order for us to pretty much have the justice, right, have the victory that we want, we need to just make dua and focus on ourselves, right? This is another big one that I'm sure, Waad, you've seen yourself as well. And,
Yeah. A bit of a controversial one, I think.
Yeah.
Because if we look at the past few decades of Islamic scholarship, it has actually focused on the self, religion as a self and not as a socio-political entity. And I think right now, any other solution that does affect the politics is kind of going against that type of, Islamic way of teaching that I've seen, has become very popular. But I'm glad you brought it up because I think it's something that we do need to discuss, and it's a hot topic, especially if you go on Twitter and places like that. It's a real hot topic because a lot of people, they want us to believe that and we're not saying dua is not important, absolutely not, right? But it's like make dua, right? And also tie a camel, do something, right? So, but please go ahead, extrapolate on that, please.
Yeah, so there's definitely 2 points I would want to make as to why this is the incorrect approach. And actually, this is subhanAllah, it's a very secularized approach. Because at the end of the day, if you're not calling for justice, if you're not calling for Islam, then Islam just stays in the home, right? Islam is not influential within the public sphere anymore if we, the Muslims, are not carrying it there. Like if the Quran, if we do not implement the Quran, then the Quran just stays on the bookshelf. That's it. It's not going to have an impact unless we carry it, right? And so the narrative that just focus on yourself, just make dua, is very secular, right? So that's definitely one point I wanted to put out there. But the reason why this is incorrect has to do with two main things. Definitely, there more can be said, but I just want to make these 2 points. Sorry. The first is the hadith, right, where the Prophet ﷺ is saying that Allah said that he sent the angels to destroy a town, right? So I'm sure you guys know which hadith I'm talking about. It's a very popular hadith, but subhanAllah, people forget it, so we should remind them with it. So Allah is going to destroy a town, right? And the angels, of course, they're going to go do it, right? Because they do not disobey Allah. But they tell Allah that there's a pious person there who prays and worships you 24/7, right? Like, are you sure you want us to do this pretty much? Because there's a pious person there. And Allah says, start with him, right? And the reason, right, Allah says is that he saw injustice in the land and didn't even care to say anything or to do anything about it. He just continued praying and making dua and left the people how they were. He did not enjoin good. He did not forbid evil. So, subhanAllah, Allah is sending angels to destroy a town and wants them to start with the most pious person who prays and fasts and makes dua, but doesn't do anything else, right? And so that's why this concept of just make dua, just focus on yourself, focus on your family, is not correct. Now, definitely, like how Waad said, it's not that we're downplaying dua or anything. Definitely, dua is important, prayer is important. Working on yourself is important. Focusing on your family is important, right? We're not saying those things are not important, but they are not the only things that we should be doing. We also need to enjoy for call for Islam and have an impact within our communities, right? That's another aspect that we need to focus on, as well as dua and all these other things, right? So that's one point I wanted to make. The second point has to do with the seerah itself. So definitely, as we know, the Prophet ﷺ did do the da'wah, right? And we know that at the beginning, he had his private da'wah, which focused a lot on personal development and tazkiyah, and basically getting those early believers ready for the da'wah because they were going to go through a lot of hardship, right? As we know. Now, someone could take that and argue, see, guys, so if we want to do what the Prophet did, we need to start with what he did, right? Which is tazkiyah and personal development, right? The issue, though, is that there are already a lot of Muslims in today's day and age who are ready, though, have already done the tazkiyah, who have already done the personal development, right? Because you're comparing this society with a society during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, right? He had all these early believers who were with the Prophet ﷺ were all reverts, right? New Muslims who didn't know anything about Islam, right? And Islam was obviously just starting to be revealed, right? But that's not our context, though. Our context is that there's 2 billion Muslims in the world, and many of them are already who already have that piece. They already have the tazkiyah, they already have the personal development and the political awareness, and they already pray and they already fast. So what now, right? Are we expecting 2 billion people to get on board before we move? Because this is never going to happen, right? This is naive, actually. What we should be doing is, why don't we collaborate amongst the Muslimin who are already at that place, who already have done their tazkiyah, who've done their personal development, who are making dua, and who really want to see change in the world. Why don't we collaborate together, regardless of our differences, and do the work, do the da'wah? That's actually the better thing to do. And that is actually the next step, right? Because in today's day and age, definitely, our jihad, especially in the West, is jihad of the tongue. That's what it is. We have to speak. We have to be loud. And definitely we've seen the impact of that with these protests, with posting on social media, especially with Palestine. Like, the entire narrative is in our favor, right? So, Waad, do you have anything to add to that or any comments?
Yeah. Subhanallah. Like I said, I think for a long time we have been programmed to work in very, very I don't want to say ineffective, but we've been numbed down as an ummah, right? And I think we don't realize, because like I said, we keep on saying, and I hear a lot of people saying, oh, we need more Muslims to become better Muslims. It's like, why? And like you mentioned, we already have enough, at least to get started somewhere, right? But once again, we keep on numbing ourselves down. We keep on trying to wait for something really big. Like, have you heard the people who speak about, oh, let's just wait for Imam al-Mahdi, right? We don't understand that Allah's going to send us Imam al-Mahdi when we're ready to accept him. He's not going to come and then all of a sudden tomorrow morning there's a Khilafah state and everything's fine. And no, we live in this wishful thinking. We don't understand that there's work that needs to go into this, right? And at the same time, that we have what it takes, because I can't stop, like, from what I've been able to see, like, all over the place, is that so many Muslims think we don't have what it takes. It is this low self-esteem in the ummah that we have, that is, I feel like it's the main reason that we're not going forward. It's like we're waiting for something to happen, some great thing to happen, and we don't realize that we're the great thing. The great thing is us. We don't see it because we're not putting any work into it, right? And subhanallah, but I think that there is a lot of positivity that is coming, specifically with the rise of social media. I feel like if this happened 30, 40 years ago, the response would have been much more negative, right? What I'm seeing now is because we are speaking, because we are coming out, right? Despite the few negative people who want to come and numb us down even more by, telling us that this is haram and that is haram, protesting or boycotting. But despite that, we are seeing, I mean, how many non-Muslims who have never heard of Islam or who have heard of Islam but have only heard negative things about Islam have actually decided to go and open a Quran book. And then they're reading the Quran and they're saying, wow, this makes a lot of sense. A lot of people are looking at the faith of the Palestinians, and the iman that they have, and they're thinking, whatever you have faith in, it must be something so great for you to be so, like, I wouldn't say okay, but in hopeful, let's say, right? Because the Palestinians show a lot of hope, right, and resilience. And so one way or another, if we were not speaking, if we were not pushing against the narrative, none of this would have been happening, right? And hopefully, the more we speak, the more change we'll see, even from a political perspective, the more, international pressure there will be on Israel to stop what they're doing to the Palestinians. But if we're sitting down and we're doing nothing, there's not going to be any change. There's not going to be any change. So this does lead me to ask, um, right now, we've covered a few things. We said boycotting. Boycotting, I personally feel, is a very effective way. Um, we spoke about the protesting. I think another thing that's really, really good, and we covered on it just now, is speaking out, whether it be in your locality, if you're not a person who likes to come on social media, whether it be typing, like just if you don't want to, show your face or whatever it is, whether it be making videos, whether it be sharing educational content. These are all ways in which we can make a change, because we have to understand, even if from a political perspective, we cannot change governments, right? If we get enough people around the world to understand, like to unpack the propaganda, because there's a lot of propaganda. I mean, Israel is paying celebrities to come on their side, right? They're paying content creators to come and make content on their side. And this just shows, by the way, for those of you who don't think we are powerful enough to make a change, this just shows how scared and desperate Israel is to change the narrative in their favor. Because I want us to understand that we have the power. We have what it takes to make a change. And that's why sitting down and crying and feeling helpless is not going to get us anyway. In any capacity that we can, we must move forward. And we have to understand that when we put in the effort, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to help us. That's really when the help of Allah is going to come. But we cannot sit back, do nothing, and expect the change to happen, right? So if we continue to speak, continue to push back against the propaganda, against the narrative, and we get a lot of people, whether they be Muslims or non-Muslims, mostly non-Muslims, right, to speak against, you don't think that everyone has some sort of humanity in them. People in Western countries are going to start demanding that their Western government stop supporting Israel themselves, not even the Muslims. Even the non-Muslims are going to start pressuring their governments. The whole international community is going to start pressurizing their governments in order to stop this. And at one point, Israel is just going to have to sit back and, be it a ceasefire, whatever the point is, there is going to be some sort of change. As Muslims, we really need to be, at the moment, the best thing that we can be doing is to be speaking out, exposing the propaganda, exposing, speak, even though I encourage everybody to speak out, whether it be typing or videos or whatever it is, but to speak out against the narrative, to share information that is against the propaganda that is being spread. Everybody, that capacity.
Yeah, I think something else I'd add to that really is that, look, another very unfortunate thing that I've seen many Muslims fall into is that we rely too much on people or organizations or governments that do not have our interests. They just do not, and to think that they do is very naive. It does not help our cause. And subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give us the victory. It's already promised. It's just a fact, right? But he's going to give it to the believers, people who really have iman in Islam, who want Islam to, and those who want to live by Islam in all aspects of life. Now, the people in current government systems that we have across the board, anywhere in the world, right, without picking on anyone in particular, but just in general and across the board, east to west, north to south, they're have our interests. Even if they say that they do, even if they proclaim that, we have some Islamic laws that we implement, look how Islamic we are, it doesn't matter because we can see that they don't have our interests. If that is something that was not clear to you before, I hope it is clear to you now, because subhanAllah, there are 57 Muslim countries and not one country sent one man to defend the Palestinians. Despite all of the horrifying images of women, children, people with disabilities, the elderly, and men, right? SubhanAllah, people always want to focus on the women and children, but the men as well are being killed. Yeah. SubhanAllah. And the fact that they did not send one means that, what are they doing? They're prioritizing their political interests, their economies, right, over the Muslimin, right? They view Muslim blood as cheap. They do not value us, right? Across the board, like east or west, doesn't matter. And we need to stop relying on them. And what this also tells us is that the change is going to come from the people. The change is going to come from us. It's going to come from people like me, like Waad, like the people watching this podcast. Don't think that you have no influence. Don't think that you're not an important part in this. You're not an important player in this, because you are. SubhanAllah, if we look at the seerah of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was it the elites at the time who made the changes? Did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam go to them and ask them to change? Yes, he did, but they said no, right? So he gave that nusra. He gave that nasiha. Sorry, he gave that advice, and they were not listening, right? And at the end of the day, who brought the change? The people. The people really did, right? Mm-hmm. And then eventually, got involved. People in politics got involved. Why? Because the people pushed them, right? Gave them that message. So we need to understand that we cannot just wait for people like shuyukh, politicians to change. We need to have the public opinion for that change first, right? SubhanAllah, even Bilal ibn Rabah at that time was a slave. Literally, the person in society who has zero power, zero say, it would be a slave. And he was still involved in the da'wah. He still had a role. He still had influence,
Yeah.
Why? Because he enjoined good and he forbid evil. He stood by Islam, right? And even the women during the time of the Prophet ﷺ were also involved, right? We have one example for just to say an example off the top of my head. But when the Prophet ﷺ was praying in front of the Kaaba and he went in sujood and they put camel intestines on his back, Fatima radiallahu anha, she came and she took it off, right, his back, he can get up, and she cursed the Quraysh for this. She cursed the people who did this to him in public in front of the Kaaba, right? So even women during the time of the Prophet ﷺ had a role, and they also spoke out, right? But it was the people who generated that public opinion that pushed that call of Islam and enjoined good and forbid evil, which caused the influentials in society to make those changes, right? But it starts with us, starts with the people, right? So we should never think that, we're just going to wait for these people to change, because to be honest with you, the kuffar are not going to change. The hypocrites are not going to change. Why are you waiting for people to change? You need to bring the change yourself. You have to take responsibility. And that's something that the ummah lacks. We lack responsibility. We're always waiting for somebody else to do the work. But why? Why are you waiting for someone else to do it when you're the Muslim? You're the one who's supposed to be carrying this. Allah and His Messenger told you to speak out, told you to enjoin good and forbid evil. They didn't go and talk to the hypocrites and the kuffar and say, oh, guys, you need to enjoin good and forbid evil. No, this is not what He said. He said to the believers to do these things, right? So this is something that we need to change. We need to change this mindset within ourselves that stop waiting for other people. You need to do the work yourself. And yes, it's hard. The da'wah is hard. But guess what? That's why it's so rewardable. And that's why it's going to take a lot of dua, tazkiyah, personal development to keep going, right? Just like how the Prophet ﷺ, helped those early Muslims in their personal development and in their tazkiyah, right? And in their worship to get them ready for the da'wah, because the da'wah is hard. You also need to be doing those things, right? We need to be those people. The same way that we admire the Palestinians, right? And see how resilient they are, how much iman they have. Let's use that as an example for ourselves. Let's be like them, right? What are we waiting for, really? That's something else I wanted to add, as Sister Waad.
SubhanAllah. Yeah, SubhanAllah. Like I said, even these people that we put our trust in and that we hope for a change from them, many of them don't even want us to change because it benefits them. They understand that when we come together, that we can make a change, that we have an impact, that we, the people, can make the impact, right? But they don't want us to know. This is why they've been numbing us down for such a long time. And we have to realize that we have to get out of that programming, that we have to bring the power back into our hands.
Yeah, and subhanAllah, there's so many examples of people around the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, men, women, slaves, people who are richer or poorer, who are all involved in this. Like, it's not that one group of people are responsible and everybody else is not. No, if you're a Muslim, then you have responsibility in this, right? The Prophet ﷺ never, ever made a difference between gender, for example, right? So if you take all of the ayat and hadith, right, especially even the ones that we just mentioned, did Allah or His Messenger ﷺ make a difference between men and women? Did He say, oh, men, enjoin good, forbid evil? Oh, men, go protest or anything? Like, no, like, or speak out? No, it's just believers, enjoin good, forbid evil, do not transgress, submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? All these things. So there is no difference between men and women when it comes to this particular issue, right? Obviously, in Islam, we know that there are differences between men and women in certain aspects, especially within the household. But when it comes to the da'wah, when it comes to enjoining good and forbidding evil, there is no difference. And that's something that I see a lot as well. That happens to the sisters, right? Because, even I've seen other da'iyas online get told by brothers, you're a sister, why are you talking? You're a sister, why are you posting online? You're a sister, why are you go fix your hijab, right? And it's not right to say that to the sisters who are putting in the work, right? Because Allah and His Messenger did not make that difference. Actually, men and women have equal responsibility in the da'wah, equal responsibility in enjoining good and forbidding evil, right? This responsibility is not just on the men. And I know that because this is a sisters podcast, I assume a lot of our audience is sisters. And so please don't ever let a brother make you feel like you don't have a voice, like you shouldn't be speaking, because that is not true at all. SubhanAllah, women hold so much influence to the point where, if we look at actually a lot of the propaganda, right, especially towards the Muslim community, they always attack the women, right? Because they know that women have such big influence, especially on the next generation, right? Within the household. So, and if they don't want us to speak, they don't want us to have any influence, right? So please don't let that rhetoric get to you. It's not true. There's no grounding in the Quran and Sunnah when it comes to this. The only real argument that I've seen come from these brothers that have to do with this is they'll use Aisha radiallahu anha as an excuse. But to be honest with you, I don't know why they use her as a evidence to say what they say, because she was so vocal in public. She was a scholar in her own right. She even participated in politics. Like, subhanallah, like at least pick a different Muslima around the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to use as an excuse. Why are you using Aisha radiallahu anha? Because subhanallah, she was so vocal, and I think the main evidence that they try to use is that, oh well, at her house she spoke behind a hijab, right, a barrier. But subhanallah, this was in her house. And that's because she did that pretty much because the men were seeking knowledge from her at her house. And instead of her wearing a hijab, she put the barrier there. That's it. Like her actual khimar. She wasn't wearing her khimar, but she put the other hijab, right? The barrier, the curtain in front of her. But that doesn't mean that she did that when she went outside, right? SubhanAllah. So there really is no correlation at all between Aisha radiallahu anha and then women speaking in public or doing da'wah or participating. Like there's literally none. It's so silly to the point where it's mind-boggling that they even use her as an excuse, because she was so out there, like she was so involved. SubhanAllah. So yeah, please that um, that rhetoric make you feel like you don't have a say, because you do.
Yeah.
And Allah and Messenger have put that responsibility on you as well.
Yeah, subhanAllah. So I've put a verse here, which I think everybody needs to read this verse, because it's mind-boggling how these people read the Quran and they don't read it properly. Here in this Quran, in this verse, we spoke about differentiating between men and women. Here, Allah is explicitly mentioning both men and women. And he's saying that both the believing men and women are allies of one another. They enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong. They establish the prayer and give zakah, obey Allah and His Messenger. Now, basically, this is what makes us Muslimin. We don't understand, right? There are some things, that are difference between men and women in Islam. We know that, right? But when it comes to what makes us Muslims, right, it's the same for both men and women. And the essence of being a Muslim is that we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and that we enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong. This goes for across the board for all Muslims. And I think this is something that we're not taught about a lot. So then a lot of women are told, you just stay in your home and that's it, right? And we don't understand that it might be in a different way, right? For example, we don't go and do jihad, for example. We might not be as upfront as the men, right? But at the same time, we still do go out there and we do make some sort of impact according to our own capacity, to whatever we can. But the point of the matter is, don't sit down and not do anything.
So I think the last thing that I would add, and then we can end off here, inshallah, is that subhanallah, Allah is saying that the believing men and the believing women are allies. Allyship has to do with your political interests and the what you stand for, what you believe in, and what you call for, right? And subhanallah, this is different than just having like a friendship, right? This is allyship, that we literally stand by each other. We stand up for each other. We are there for one another. We have the same interests. We have the same goals. We have the same aspirations. We want the same things for the ummah, right? And this is different than being an ally with a non-Muslim, right? Who does not have the same interests as you. SubhanAllah, a disbeliever and a believer could be at a protest together saying free Palestine, but they're actually, their understanding of freedom is totally different, right? So just keep that in mind as well, inshallah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this podcast beneficial for everyone who is able to listen to it. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep all of us steadfast and sincere. And may Allah grant us the victory that we long for in Palestine, in Kashmir, in East Turkestan, and all over the Ummah. Ameen, ameen, ameen.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair, Sister Sara, for joining and for sharing with me your insights. It's been a very beneficial podcast, inshallah, and I hope many people will listen to this and benefit from it, bi'iznillah ta'ala. If you guys have any more questions, make sure to leave it in the comment section and also to let us know your thoughts